before we just go into a lot of truth talking, some difficult conversations in this panel. And if someone can give me the 5 at 20 past, that would be amazing. All right. So every single person, that sits on this panel has owned or owns a business. I've asked these guys in particular to be very real, right? Let's not sugarcoat anything, because these are the conversations that we need to have and that are going to move the needle forward. We can't wash over this stuff anymore. So the fact is, business is very challenging. Survival rates are grim. It's well documented that only about 50% of businesses survive past 3 years, which is quite sobering. We see insolvencies rise after that. So what about businesses operating in the NDIS? I think it's even more sobering. We've got a lot of changes, we've got reform, we've got portable long service leave coming in for South Australians here. It's getting harder and harder to do business, so something has to change. And that's why we're here today. I will go off script, but I'll start with a framed question. Alright? So, to you all, what are the most significant challenges you're seeing or experiencing from the business perspective? So this is very much about business now. And what strategies, what have you done about it? You know, when you come up with a problem, against a problem, what are some of the things that you've done perhaps in the last 6 to 12 months so we can keep it super relevant? Okay, and are they working? Because not everything works. You want to go first, please?
Oh, come on, up, down on purpose.
Nicole?
Serves you right.
Push up.
I'm happy to go first.
Go.
So before I start, I just wanted to also acknowledge that there's a lot of talk about us as providers, but there's equally in this community providers that are either family members of participants or participants themselves. And I think if we sit and talk about how difficult it is for us as businesses, as providers, that we're ignoring the real impact, which is how extremely difficult it is for participants and the supporters of those people. And as a person with disability myself that's supported by a system outside of the NDIS that's been on our own journey of a revolving door. Unfortunately, I was talking before, and the NDIS is becoming what the system that I was in was like 10 years ago. The system that I am in now is like what the NDIS was. And so it's, personally quite on top of the challenges as a business owner and a business leader, which I think is our responsibility in business, but acknowledging the impacts it has on the people that we support is perhaps more important. But for me, what's been most difficult is that extra layer of trauma that is brought back from the past experiences and watching other people have to go through that. So yeah, the question was the challenges.
Yeah, and what have you employed something to address those?
Yes.
And is it working?
So we've had no real direct impacts of the changes on the NDIS over the last 12 months. It's the indirect impacts that we're seeing. That's the confusion, misinformation, disinformation, and some of that's unintentional. Some of that's very deliberate by providers and people taking advantage of a vacuum of knowledge coming out of the agency. And had a big meeting yesterday with some people at the agency about that conversation. And so what we're doing about that is education, where we can, that's accessible to participants. But also as a business, what we're doing is, and I know you wanted it to be contemporary, but it's really no different to what we did in COVID. And before COVID, I'm very fortunate through my return to work support that I get, which is very much like a micro enterprise, that I'm able to access good business coaching and support. And so very early on, we set values for our business, which is like a compass that we use. And just like a compass, it's most useful in times of turbulence when you can't see the sun or the hills or something else to get your bearings. That's when you pull it out. And we used our values to navigate through COVID and come out of COVID stronger. And we're using that now. And we continue to use that. So I would suggest everybody having values and at the core of everything that you do.
Should we go to Nicole first?
Look, I think for us, we're very much in that home and living space, so SGA provision from a housing point of view. We've seen quite a lot of changes over the last several years. been pretty slammed in the media recently as well, Four Corners report. I think for us, I could probably pick 1,000 different things, to be honest. I think for us, it's looking after ourselves. We've gone, from our housing, I'll just talk about our LIVABILITY, but a small team of, 3 of us who started together. Me, I've had 25 plus years experience right across community services. And I do see us as an entire sector of community services, not just the NDIS sector, and then, smaller again, just the SDA or home living kind of part of that. But that growth of a team going from 3 of us, which was one that was, kind of the build side, one that's the property maintenance side, and me from the, disability community services side, right up to a team of 16 now. And putting that leadership structure in place, and we've just started some training called EOS, which is Entrepreneurs Operational Systems, something or other that costs us a lot of money, but it's actually been probably a big game changer for us very recently. To either look at, our operational structure, our leadership structure. For me, as the CEO, and kind of going from being the one that does all the doing to kind of being the innovator or the visionary of the business is quite a shift. But I think just leaning into your team, really chatting to them, seeing what they need. Obviously, they're the ones that are on the ground a lot with participants, and making sure that, if your team has lived experience, that it also then has the training that goes alongside that. And I guess just that open communication, I think, is probably one of the biggest things for me, is always having that open door policy and giving that extra support to our staff that are lived experience as well as. And I've loved experience as well as parents. I have a child that's autistic, ADHD, PDA, dyspraxic. He loves to call himself the alphabet. But it is a different set of challenges and a different set of knowledge compared to actually being someone who's living with a disability. And I think we need to kind of shift a little bit of language sometimes, that as parents, if we don't have a disability, lived experience of mental health, drug and alcohol, I don't have lived experience of, an actual disability, but I think we need to kind of change that and lean into it a little bit and explain that there is a difference around that. But I think, communication and leaning into your team.
Do you want to say, or shall we go on to the next question? Go on.
Yeah,
go.
I come at it from quite a different perspective, I think, and I think it can be quite valuable. I'm in the vocational education training space. We are highly regulated. I would say we are probably more heavily regulated than what the NDIS sector is. And our regulator has an absolute totalitarian approach. It's a big stick approach, that's all there is to it. I think I've been in and around in the vet sector for almost 20 years, and I've been supporting and servicing the disability space, NDIS space, aged care and childcare for about 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. I think it's fair to say that I'm watching exactly what you guys are going through right now. I was going through it 6-7 years ago. We had a national regulator come in 2015. We had a complete overhaul of the sector. The absolute intention of that regulator was to halve our sector, and it worked. Unfortunately, what we do see in these systems is that we do sometimes lose good quality providers because they just don't have it in them. They just don't. But what we do see is a lift in quality, and I think that's what's really important to remember in this, and this is where I think when we start talking about collaboration, there is absolutely, and I echo the word Sam says, there is enough work in this state for everybody. And the harder we work together by lifting quality and supporting each other to lift quality, we actually lift the quality of the entire sector. I also really want to pick up on points around being courageous and brave. A bit like Brendan, I saw a huge gap in our sector, not just in my sector, but in the sectors that the vocational education and training providers support, so industry. I realised that we were not having a strong enough voice federally, or particularly in South Australia. So crazily, I went out and spoke to 9 of the most amazing providers that I know, owners of providers, and I said, I've got this crazy idea. And they went, another one in there. We put together the South Australian Skills Alliance. We launched on the 14th of July, and we are now a voice, a cohesive voice for skills in South Australia. We've been really intentional by not calling it a vocational education and Training Sector Alliance, we talk about skills, because for me it's about creating disruption. I come from a framework of nationally accredited qualifications. I think they're horseshit. They're not working, we don't move fast enough, we're not giving industry what they need quickly enough, we're not being innovative enough. We're actually putting barriers in front of our students to move into new sectors by mandating full qualifications that aren't fit for purpose. I guess the other thing that I do a lot of is I listen. I meet so many providers every day, and I lose count, and I'm really sorry if you've met me and I don't recognise you or remember your name, because I meet hundreds of you every year. And I really try to listen and hear the problems. And I guess what I'm hearing is the definition of insanity. You're all doing exactly the same thing and expecting a different result. At some point you have to stand up and do things differently. Thank you, April. I'm putting solutions in front of you every day to do this differently. I'm putting systems in front of you to value-based recruit, so you're recruiting the right people because they have the right heart, passion. I can teach them everything else, but you want the right people in the sector. So stop and have a think about what it is that your business wants and needs, and think about how you can do it differently. I'm going to say, can I make one more comment?
Go on.
Just really, really quickly. I get passionate. I haven't sworn, look at me. I think the other really important thing to remember is, in terms of quality, your quality management system is so important. All right, you are required to be compliant all the time, not at a point in time. So when you're looking at setting up your policies and your processes, and you're looking at how you're operationalising all of that, make sure it actually is manageable for your team and it's fit for purpose for your business. Because you need to be providing the evidence that you are working alongside your policies and processes. So if your quality management system is not working in your business, then it's not right for your business. You need to have another look at it.
Yeah.
Cassie, what we see a lot, we work with about 1,000 businesses every year at the Polaris Centre, that there's no lack of heart. There's absolutely no lack of heart. There's 215 people in here, you tell me? Yeah. So there's 215 hearts, really good hearts. To use a business term, hearts equivalent, it's actually 1,000. So there's no lack of heart. Where the challenges are is how do we match that purpose, that foundation in NDIS businesses and providers with profitability, and how can we help you as NDIS businesses and providers to flip that, instead of thinking profit is money, that profit is a resource that you can actually put back into your business, support your business to be sustainable. We have a crazy term at the Polaris Centre, and I know there's some people here who may have heard it, but turnover is for vanity, profit is for sanity, because it gives you the resources to grow, to reinvest, to make sure you have the right equipment, the right team. So don't think of it as this additional surplus stuff that you've got, but essential stuff to help you deliver to your participants, to the beneficiaries of your services, to the customers of your services, and others. Money is a resource when it comes to NDIS businesses, and I'd love to see you change the mindset about how you think about profit in your business.
Thank you. Sash. I contacted Sash right at the beginning of when I was first starting, I guess, the inception of this idea to bring everyone together. And we had quite a robust conversation, I think it's fair to say. I was quite frustrated, we're quite frustrated, because there's some quality businesses that are just going to fail. And so I really want to lean into some of the conversation that we had. around exploring business models, diversification and partnerships in particular, and just what that actually means. So when we talk about diversification, we're not necessarily talking about diversifying within the NDIS sector, doing more services, more and more. We're actually looking somewhere different. And I'd love for the panel to sort of really unpack for us what diversification could look like, what that might mean for our business model, but also I think we need to have some real conversations about partnerships and the fear that might be out there in regard to partnerships as well. Fear of losing IP in particular, and that vulnerability piece. So how can we do that in a safe way for us and a safe way and a meaningful way for our clients?
So diversification is a really good technical business term, but something that was said years ago by somebody I don't know, but you've probably heard it always, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's essentially what diversification means, is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Are there resources, talents, services that you have in your current business that can be deployed to other income streams, even if they're completely different from your core business, that supports your core business? So to do your core business as best as you can you sell products? Let me give you an example. There are many businesses out there that have a core business, and sometimes they make 25 to 50% of their revenue and turnover selling swag. People buying clothes with their brand on it. That's diversification. That's not my core business, but you know what? People want to buy and wear that. I will sell it, and the money from that I'll put back into my core services. You know, if PTR had polos and blue blazers with Determined 2 on it, I would buy it and wear it.
There you go.
And the profits of that would go into core business, which is immersion therapy and research. So think bigger. You know, is there a book? We talked about IP. One way to lock your IP in is write a book about your services and then stream that income into it. What are other ways you can add to your resource bank, not your money bank or your profit bank, your resource bank that will support what your core business is? So think broader. I bumped into America here earlier, years ago. I said something to her that she recited to me, which was very impressive. Is think big, now think bigger. And diversification is about that.
Before we move on, again, I was going to shout out to the Scoot girls as well. We were just talking about this on Friday night, actually. So what you've done is you've built a solution for people that is going to transcend different sectors, right? So we looked at aged care, we looked at DVA, we looked at health, we looked at a whole host of ways that you can meaningfully scale your business because you've created a service with meaning, not built, exactly as Ali said, for a system. So I just wanted to add that up.
Yeah, just on that, you know, diversification I think is something that we all need to look at, especially I guess with NDIS we're on shifting sand all of the time, so we need to, you know, to look outside that at times. From a housing perspective, we, for probably at least 12 months, and everyone's starting to talk about it now, we've already been doing it for 12 months, but is to look at where there's oversaturated housing in different pockets of Australia. Everyone's talking about it. We've already been using that housing for homelessness, drug and alcohol, mental health. We're looking at, you know, partnering to do some DV housing. We're not real estate agents. We come from the community services sector. We want to have supported housing that is accessible right across. You know, something that we've talked about probably about 8-9 years ago. I wanted to do like an aged care version of housing, but more looking at families who had, say, a child with a disability, had a big block, knock down, rebuild, build one for themselves that they can retire in, that they can age in place, build one for their child, that no matter what happens to them, they have that suitable home forever, and then another one for someone else's family member that hasn't been able to do that. When we got into the space, we very much wanted people to own their own homes, so that was our core value, was for people with disabilities to own their own home. Unfortunately, banks were not on board with that very early, so we've had to go into that kind of investor space, but bringing it back to our core, which is for people to be able to own their own home, whether that's their family members, them themselves, or, you know, if it is investor-led, but looking outside of not just NDIS and looking at where you can add value with something that is your niche that you're very good at. Kind of do the same thing in aged care, kind of do the same thing in, you know, DV, kind of do the same thing across the board, mental health, drug and alcohol. So yeah, just looking at what you do really well and backing yourself and do that where you can add value in other parts of the sector.
Yeah, look, my take on diversification, you absolutely have to, and I agree with it. Since now I work in a very similar framework where I'm funded, I have to run my business into a framework model. What I do just want to say about diversification is get your house in order first. Get your core services in order, make sure your foundation is solid before you move into anything else. You don't necessarily have the resources to go and do all these other things, all right? The other thing I want to talk about partnerships and collaboration is due diligence, okay? I've been burnt, right? It's cost me a lot of money because I trusted too quickly, too early, and I have learned expensive lessons. So make sure you do your due diligence and make sure you get all your paperwork and ducks in a row before you move forward with anything with anyone else as well.
I'm just sad. I've known Sasha for years. I was going to get mine. And our t-shirts and our hoodies. If anyone, currently we can't get our online supplier that was doing our merch through our website, so if anyone's got one of those contacts, reach out.
I do. I've got someone for it.
Beautiful.
All right.
Otherwise, shoot me an email. But diversification is something I guess we're born from.
Yes.
If you want to, I can speak to that. Like, you know, and many people understand what our mission is at Determined to and what we're trying to do with immersion therapy. And we've got one simple purpose, and that's to get our service in front of as many people as possible. And we started before NDIS, and I actually didn't realise that there was a need in the community. I come from a different scheme, like I said before, and I just assumed people that had a need like me got those needs met. But unfortunately, the majority of the clients that were coming to us in the beginning didn't have that need met. And I went back to return to work, and I originally started public speaking for them, sharing my story with my injury over the last 20 years, and used that money to seed fund our business and to support people with disability, removing the barrier for them, which was financial at the time. And we did about $250,000 in pro bono in our first 3 years, and that kind of established us. And we still do that now. We offer about 10% of our services to people who don't fit the funding model. Not everyone fits the NDIS. I met a young girl yesterday with a whole series of really complex disabilities who's not yet on the NDIS, 25. We'll be supporting her pro bono. We're only a small business, we're not a corporate, and we're not corporate funded. We put every dollar back into our social impact areas. We're a certified social impact, social enterprise. And for us, that's investing in research, nearly $1 million in the 10 years we've been running into research, and that's not all come from us. The majority of that has come from external stakeholders like university, government, etc. A big part of that is in kind from us. Hoodies and shirts. Not much from that. And so for us, the growth was always about seeing our service in front of other people. And a few years ago, we did our first license agreement, and so that's always been our journey from the beginning. I met my business coach back in 2016, and like I said before, a bit like my enterprise, I swapped out my physio, my OT, and my psychologist for a business coach, a franchise lawyer, and an accountant. And so one of the benefits I've just come to learn from your previous talk is leaving school in year 9 and not learning to read also meant that I never read the raw book either. And I remember seeing my business coach and he said, "What do you want?" And I showed him a video, and anyone that's followed us from the beginning will know some of our early videos. And I showed him that, which was Ben Everson. I can share that publicly, it's on our website. And I said, all I want is for many people to have that experience as possible. And that was 10 years ago, and every day between then and now has been to that end. And so a few years ago we were fortunate enough to enter into a pretty significant agreement. But again, like you said, it doesn't always work out as you planned. I mean, we're very lucky to have all those supports in place, but that still doesn't prevent it not necessarily going the way you'd hope. But the reality is we do have an operation running in Melbourne that's not ours. It's running under licence by another provider, and they're changing people's lives. And so I guess one thing I've learned in business is the perspective is everything. So if you zoom right in, it can look horrific and really tough, and that's hard for us as leaders because we're asked to do that a lot. But if we also zoom out, which we're always telling our staff to do, but we never do ourselves, when we zoom out, it can be really good looking at exactly the same patch. And so I think, zoomed in, that's challenging, but zoomed out is really positive.
So that talks to a little bit of, not a little bit, celebrating the small wins, the big wins and everything in between. You wanted to say something before?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on partnership. I just happen to be a partnership broker. It's a global thing, so look up your local partnership brokers in your region. It is a discipline. Traditionally, we think about partnerships as win-win. Is that right? Yeah. If we partner, you win, I win. I guess what we've learned out of partnerships is that it's got to be more than that. Partnerships, when two or more organisations form a partnership, the combined effort and resources of those should really take each of those organisations exponentially bigger than what they would have done just by, two people getting together. And that's about that thing about, think bigger, that if you and I are going to join as partners, we could be complementary services. It shouldn't just keep our businesses sustainable, it should take us to another level. It should really exponentially increase our impact, the outcomes that we achieve for participants, the outcomes that we achieve for our organisations. So that's really important. A few of my fellow panellists here talked about agreements and contracts. Just remember, when we talked about that, if it's not in writing, it's not an agreement. If it's not in writing, properly prepared, it's not a contract. Handshakes are great in a networking event, but if we're going to partner and we're going to do real business that benefits your organisation, my organisation, our participants, our families, then it needs to be really clear. And collaboration is not partnership. All right, collaboration is not partnership. Partnerships are formal agreements that we've created. With collaboration, you could have an MOA, a Memorandum of Agreement, or an MAU, which is a Memorandum of Understanding, which are not legally binding, which is helpful just to clear up how we're going to work or collaborate together. But if you're going to go into partnership, then it's got to be in writing, it's got to be proper agreements so that each organisation is protected, and more importantly, your participants and your customers are protected.
Fantastic, thank you. And just to follow on from that's not exclusive referring either.
Yeah.
Please.
Diversification is not more services to them.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess we were talking about elephants before, right? Elephants in the room.
Lost 5 kilos.
Look, there are a lot of providers, not everyone, but there are a lot of providers really struggling to make ends meet, to keep the doors open. And I'd really like to explore some different ways in which we might be able to help those providers. Perhaps it's a conversation around shared or purchased services or outsourcing and more. I'd really love to get some perspectives, if there's any experiences here in the room, and any other ideas that we might have that can shift the needle for people in the room, and perhaps ourselves as well.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to start. I was actually having a conversation with you guys provider just this week about exactly this topic, and what I'm seeing at the moment is this absolute grab. I need more participants, I'm trying to find more participants. Where are they? I need more, and they're thinking that's how they're going to generate more profit. But what they're actually not realising is they have participants in front of them that maybe they're not servicing very well. And what they're actually doing is finding another participant who lives 5.5 hours away for a 3-hour service that they then have to pay someone 7 hours to get there, get back, and it's actually not making them any money, it's actually costing them money. And in fact, by diversifying their services from sales into community and so forth, what they're actually doing is stretching their resources. So I get back to get your house in order, get your foundation strong. Once you know what your ideal participant looks like and feels like, and the services that you can offer them, and how that works, and you've got your processes and your procedures and your policies that all sit around that, and it's working, and you can see the money coming in, right? You're making money because you're allowed to. You're a business. I've got 4 children. I'm a single parent. I'm a single income earning household. I have 4 children. They're fucking expensive, right? They really are. I tell my children I'm a millionaire every day because it costs me $250,000 to raise each one of them. They don't believe me. But that's what I'm saying. It's really important that you are making money, because at the end of the day, if you're not doing that and you're not surviving, your business will not survive.
Wonderful point there, Emily, and I'm going to build on that. We work with 1,000 businesses a year. The thing that we see is that people deviate from what we call business fundamentals. Doesn't matter whether you're starting out or whether you're a business that's big and doing well. Where it goes wrong is when people stop doing the fundamentals. Record keeping, compliance. How important is compliance? The other one is marketing. One of the most important activities. Now, I'm not talking sales. Don't confuse marketing and sales. Marketing is the invite. When marketing does their job really well, your salespeople will be run off their feet. But marketing is the foundation to that. My mentor many years ago said, and I share it with every person I come across, he said, Sash, when times are tough, market like hell. When times are good, market like hell. That means you never stop marketing. Now, I've met a lot of business people and I talk to them, and when they're doing really well, and they've got lots of sales and lots of participants, guess what the first part of their budget they cut? Marketing. Oh, we're doing well. Create a waiting list. Find other ways. Refer to other providers. But never ever stop marketing. What's the point of having the brightest light in town, the best service, if you've got a basket over it? Marketing takes the basket off your light.
Just before I hear your perspective, Nicole, you know, marketing used to make me kind of vomit a little bit in my mouth. Yes, but the narrative I shifted to was, other than it's not about me and who's missing out, is that it can be about relationships, right? It's about relationships. It's forming relationships with your customers, your potential customers, and that comes through storytelling and being authentic and being real, sharing the good, perhaps sometimes the not so good, but you share anyway, and that builds know, like and trust, right? I kind of disappeared off the face of the earth for, I don't know, 15 months, 18 months. And I came back, and look, we've got a room here full of people. So it speaks to that brand awareness. People, apparently, they might see you, say, 20 or 30 times, and they might not buy from you for another 2 years or more, but you'll still be front of mind. So really important.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I don't know that you were talking, go big and then go bigger again. But I also think there's sometimes no shame in actually scaling right back. The reason why, sort of talk about different levels of registration and different levels of size of businesses. And I think sometimes the reason why some individual sole trader workers have done so well is because they are scaled back. Their marketing is them in the community doing the actual job, and people are seeing them do an amazing job. That's the best marketing you can possibly get. If you're looking at going into every single state, I don't work in South Australia at all. I'm here to share sometimes what we do crap in Victoria. I won't talk about my footy team because I can't kill it. But that scaling back sometimes means not going into that stuff. Do your niche, do it well, and looking at how you can kind of save in a different direction. And if that means staying under 750 grand so you don't pay payroll tax, but you're making a really good profit, maybe it only needs 2 or 3 of you to do the job. That's amazing. But I think looking at, in some cases where, you know, scaling back is going to help. Sometimes, you know, that whole rubber band thing of pulling back actually makes you project far further. Once you've stretched yourself, you're not going to shrink back, but you can get yourself, you know, and, you know, I know Sam, you spoke about this kind of stuff earlier. Sometimes you have to scale back to see what you're doing really well and what you want to put your resources in. Sometimes that isn't another state, it isn't more staff. Sometimes it's just getting your core and getting your house in order.
My advice in here is terrible. My accountant pays me and my wife. So I haven't drawn a personal wage out of our company in 10 years, but I feel entirely privileged to be able to do that, and that's because my income support comes through other channels, and that's been supported. But what it does mean is we can put every single dollar back in, and my wife works in our company as well and manages the whole one half of all the compliance, admin and finance side. And I ask her every year when we set our budget, I want to get to the end of the year and be at $0, because I want every dollar to go back to our staff that do the great work that sees what we do happen, and into our 3 pillars of supporting people who don't get lucky enough to get funding. Research that doesn't just drive forward our business, but also drives forward the research that's inclusive of people with disability. Because one thing you might not be aware of is it's really difficult to provide an evidence base for services to people with disability, because people with disability have never been included in research. And so I'm getting myself on the university panels and things like this to include people with disability. And currently we've got a PhD, a clinical trial, and 15 other investigative projects happening right now. And we also invest in supporting clinical placements for students, and even with the education department, high school students. And what we think is really cool about that is it's people with disability getting to teach these people about disability. So they're not learning about it just from clinicians, but they're learning both from the clinicians and seeing it in practice, but also from people with disability to help. And so I just view value, and I guess when you've gone through something in life like I have, value changes. $1 coin's only worth $1. I don't own my own home. I don't know if that's ever going to be possible for me, but I feel enriched and I feel happy and healthier than I ever have in my life before, because of the work that I get. So fortunate to be able to get to do every single day. I think working in our industry is a blessing.
Pete shares a really important and interesting perspective. I just want to grab on that. So as an NDIS provider, one other thing will be really helpful if you have a look and consider it, is what's your business structure. Really be clear about your business structure. Are you a social enterprise and are going to be returning? Are you a not-for-profit? Not necessarily does mean no profit, but are you returning that to the organisation? Or are you a for-profit business? Because that will then also help you with your messaging, with your vision, with how you communicate with your staff, what you do with that resource, that money, which is really important. So sometimes we might look at a business and sort of say, well, I'm not paying, the owner's not paying themselves. We think, oh, you know. But if that's gone back in for participants, well, that's a social outcome, a social impact, and that's worth celebrating. So think about your structure and why you exist and how you're going to communicate that with your team, with your customers, with your investors. Thank you, Pete.
Which is a wonderful segue to what I'm going to talk about now, which is planning, strategic planning, reviewing your plans. Are they appropriate and are they fit for purpose right now? You know, do you review? Do you reflect? Do you take time and step out to look in, like Pete said before? Because it's a really valuable exercise, and it's not one that you do just every 5 years. You need to do this regularly. You need to know your numbers. And I don't just mean your financial numbers, the numbers inside your business. You need to know them like the back of your hand, because they tell you what the story is and where you're going. They are early indicators. No one should be surprised if they all of a sudden have to become insolvent. The story's already there. What I do want to just quickly lean into, because we've got a couple of minutes left, I just wanted to talk to the shared purchased services, but also systems, right? We must look at our systems. So that's what Emily was talking to when she was talking about getting our house in order. So what can you streamline? What can you do in the back end? How can tech help you, right? Do you need to build your own tech? Is there tech out there that can help you become more efficient so the great people that you've got can actually be doing that work that they're skilled to do, rather than, doing admin work that they just don't need to do? And that also talks to right people, right jobs, right? So let's not put, a bricklayer in an administration role or a support worker in a finance role. Like, it just doesn't work, and we see that a lot in this sector. 30 seconds, final word from each of you, please. Who wants to start?
Be kind, be awesome.
Look, it's an absolutely, from my perspective, it's an absolute privilege to work alongside this sector. I am vicariously passionate about this space. I'm absolutely honoured every day to be able to produce good quality support workers to send out to industry and work and support some of the most wonderful people in our community. That's the value I get out of it every day. I have the absolute pleasure of supporting people like Matthew to complete his Cert 3 in individual support and go back out into industry and share his lived experience. So thank you for letting me do that.
Just like I'm actually really passionate about training, and I think one of the things that I see is we are moving a lot more towards lived experience in the sector, and what better place to get our staffing from, and whether that's admin staff, whether it's on the ground, direct support workers, whatever it is. But I think the training around that, and it doesn't have to be full quals, as you said. We write a lot of our own training. We have training for the SEAL providers that work in our house. We write training around, obviously, trauma-informed stuff. A lot of our psychological safety stuff we write. Myself and my husband are both trainers as well. But I think exploring that skill development right across the sector and looking outside of just NDIS, because we are a community services sector, not just an NDIS sector. So yeah, look outside of NDIS and see we can provide value.
Two things to leave you with, of course they're business related. Firstly, it's your business and it's your baby. Don't outsource the responsibility to government, to NDIS, to somebody else. Own it, do something about it, innovate. Spider-Man once said, with great responsibility comes great power. So own your responsibility. The second thing I want to leave you with is a statement that the CEO of the Australian Institute of Management once said, John Stokes, and those of you who know me hear me roll this out all the time. Networking, it's the secret to networking. So those of you who haven't heard that before, here it is. Networking is connecting with others without the need for immediate gain. Yes. Networking is connecting with others without the need for immediate gain. Connect with people, get to know people. Don't sell me stuff at a networking event. Understand me, listen to me, offer some support and service. And then as you build those relationships, you'll build partnerships, you'll build business partners, you'll build referral networks. So don't look for the immediate gain, connect with the person.
I need to add to my 2 things.
15 seconds.
Be kind, be awesome, email me for a meeting.
Love you, man.
Thanks, everyone. Big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. a lot today, a huge amount. Before we go to where to from here, I want to know where to from here for you. So, 2 minutes. I've got a 2-minute timer. I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them, 1 minute at a time each, what is it that you're going to do differently after today? What action are you going to take? Go.